Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source. Exciting book to talk to you about today. It's another one of the books in the Horizon Experiment family. And I have the two creative minds behind the series joining me. I'm really excited to welcome a writer whose work you probably know, J.Holtham, to the show, and also the amazing cartoonist for the project, Micheal Lee Harris. So we'll start off with you, Jason. Why don't you let people know, I mentioned a couple of the Emmy Award-winning things that you might be known for. So let everybody know. This is your chance to throw your cred out there.
I can throw my credit around, though I do have to always preface it with the shows I was on that won Emmys, won them before I got there.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So yeah, I was most recently on The Handmaid's Tale. Before that, I was on Supergirl on the CW, Jessica Jones on Netflix, Cloak and Dagger on Freeform, and Pitch on Fox.
Awesome. And what about you, Michael? Where have may people have seen your work before?
I have not worked on any of those that he just said, but I got to do a six-page children's Captain America last year for Marvel Super Stories. I also did a book called Black Hitler Saves Hanukkah, and those are the main things you would have heard me from. I did a book called Gumshoe City, and those I think they're the biggest things I've done.
Well, soon I have a feeling you're going to be adding Mother Bleepin' Monsters, is how we'll say it on this
Fantastic.
show. Because it's really an awesome series. So for those not familiar, let me remind you this idea of Horizon Experiment, which is kind of curated by a friend of the show, Pornsak Pichachot, who did the first book, The Manchurian, and it's this idea of taking genres and kind of story prompts that you may be familiar with, James Bond, John Constantine, that sort of thing, and flipping them on their head, bringing in some diversity and some realism to it, which is certainly what we get here with Mother Bleepin' Monsters, this idea of kind of a college campus, kids trying to fit in, Evil Dead, that sort of thing. But I'll throw it back over to you, Jason. How do you that's kind of how I took it after reading it. Have you had a chance to practice your elevator pitch? How would you describe it?
I mean, that's pretty much it. The elevator pitch is, Evil Dead, but for Blerds. I'm a longtime horror head. Evil Dead 2 is like a foundational film for me and my aesthetic and my life. And so getting the opportunity to kind of not exactly tweak that formula, but spin it a little bit. As a horror head, I'm very aware that the black guy always dies. And that's something that we reference right early in the book as well. And I just wanted to play in that sandbox and play with those archetypes, play with a little bit of the Scooby Gang, play with it's such a like classic location, classic setting, classic story, college campus, the freshman who's there who doesn't quite fit in, his rowdy friends come to visit him, and then, monsters bust out. And I just wanted to like really take that and give it sort of a real black spin to it, just because it's not anything that I've ever gotten to see. I've never gotten to see, as a kid who went to primarily white institutions my whole life, I've never gotten to see that experience really center in these sort of stories. And so that was my whole goal. So I'm glad that that's coming through.
Yeah, and we're going to talk, okay, we're not going to spoil everybody because we want you to check it out for yourself,
Yes.
For sure. And we will dig into the story, but I want to start a little bit of a different conversation, and it goes into a lot of what you were just saying there, Jason. I've been reading comics, for, nearly 50 years now. God, I not to date myself, but this idea that when I was growing up, it was easy for me to see myself in the book, right? Like straight white male guy, yeah, that's me. And I remember like the earliest books reading, it was like the black guy was always like the angry black. It was that stereotype. And I just don't think that's really was fair, and I'm sure you guys can both speak to it better than me, because this idea of any trope, whether it's aimed at, gender or race or whatever, it's you're talking down, you're punching down. It's not representative of the whole. And so the thing that I would, want to point out about this book is it's a hell of a lot of fun. It's about fun. It's about, yeah, there's some stereotypes, but you're poking fun at them. And it's a chance for, the younger generation of African Americans who are Blerds, like you said, to be able to see something a little more representative. So, not to get, too political or preachy about it, but something that was on the mind for both of you as you're doing this. We'll start with you, Michael. We'll let you comment on that.
Yeah, it was. I have never really gotten to do a mostly black book before, and it's great that when the whole cast is primarily black, you get to play with different tropes, and you don't have to be just one. You don't have to be representative because a lot of times in media, if there's one black person, they kind of have to represent all of us, and it puts them in an impossible spot, and it's a little awkward. But here, pretty much most of the cast is black, so we get to do a lot of different things, represent a lot of different just personalities and orientations, things like that. So that was great.
What about you, Jason? Thoughts?
I mean, that is very, very much what I wanted to do and what I wanted to create, because exactly what you're saying is that, there's always one, and that one either has to fit a bunch of stereotypes and a bunch of tropes, or what you also wind up with is a lot of what I like to call, white person with a tan version of people with color, where there's nothing sort of culturally specific or culturally original about them. And I wanted to sort of blow both of those out. Uh, One, to create, yeah, a primarily black cast, a variety. One of the things that I really liked about working with Lee was like the variety of types of black people, of types of body shapes, skin colors, tones, all of that, just to sort of expand that palette and expand that world. And then for me as a writer, the fun was very important. Like that's, like I said, one of the things that I love about Sam Raimi and Edgar Wright, who are, two of my artistic idols, is that those stories are fun and they're funny and they're smart and they're also super, super culturally specific. And I wanted to capture as much of that vibe in a culture that we don't get to have a lot of fun. I love Jordan Peele and Get Out and all of that. But usually when you're dealing with something that is racially specific or tinged with sort of race relations or the race problem or however you want to put it, it just usually does wind up being sort of grim and dark, just to a large degree. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to still have that conversation about the sort of structure, institutional racism and hidden white supremacy and all of that, but also in a fun, engaging way that isn't going to feel as preachy, and also is just going to feel real. Like that's trying to just capture as much as I can of sort of that black experience, which is full of joy and full of fun and full of horror and full of fear, and has all these different colors that I wanted to play with.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of feel like, God, can we? I mean, comics have become so much, over the last 20 years in terms of genre and diversity and what have you. Let's move beyond the tokenism and just tell some fun stories. And let's be smart about this as well. You would hope the books make money, and we know that the Horizon Experiment is an experiment in the hopes that, if these first issues sell more, they're kind of like a pilot, and then we'll get to see more. It's such a huge untapped market. Like, why aren't people making more books for Blerds? Because, not that you got, anybody that's in that group that counts himself as a Blerd doesn't love, Batman and Superman and Spider-Man or whatever, but hey, let me see somebody that I can recognize myself in on the page.
Exactly. Like the world is going to be saved by the black anime kids. And I feel like there's a lot of sort of mainstream culture that keeps them out and, or at the very least, doesn't want to invite them in. That there's that sort of, I feel like there's a very deep fear of like, well, you don't want to put too many black people on the cover because then white people aren't going to buy it. And I'm like, but one, who cares? But also they should, because, black people have been buying books that have nothing but white people on the cover
Yes,
for years. So like,
exactly.
turnabout is kind of fair play, but also there is this whole other market. There are this whole other audience that is eager for stories about themselves. And like my entryway into comics, I talk about this regularly, was the X-Men and the New Mutants. Because as a black kid growing up in a very white suburb in New Jersey in the 80s, like that feeling of being an outsider, that, defending a world that hates and fear you, like I was like, I get that. I 100% get that. But now, 30, 40 years on, I don't want to talk in metaphor anymore. I don't want to hear sort of an analogy. where white people get to feel like the oppressed minority. I want, black people to talk about that experience and have those conversations in the comic books, as opposed to sort of around in the academia about it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And kind of on that point, like I remember when I first picked up Excellence from Brandon Thomas, which is a mostly black cast. It's like I didn't stop to think. Everybody said it was really good. So and I had liked stuff that Brandon had done before. I didn't stop to think. Well, it's mostly a black cast. I didn't care. I just want a good. I just want a good story. So at the end of the day, that's what we're hoping for. But let's talk a little bit about this story. I want to start with you, Micheal Lee, about your style. It's kind of stylized. It's fun. It's energetic. Is this? I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'm not familiar with your work, but is this the usual style that you work in, where it's really kind of bright and over the top, and you're sort of exaggerating body shapes and that sort of thing?
I started out with a way more like quote unquote normal, usual style of comics, and I got kind of bored with it. Like I wasn't good enough at doing that to really stand out.
Hmm.
So I decided to run as far away from it as I could, and this is what happened. And I'm pleased with how it's going thus far.
So when Jason
Uh,
approached you with this project, was it a back and forth in terms of character design and the way you wanted the world to look, or did he just say, okay, here's the story, go?
I think I was approached by Will, who introduced
Oh,
me
Will Dennis,
to
yeah.
Pornsack. Well, yeah, Will Dennis introduced me to Pornsack
Mm.
and Jay, and it was kind of like a mildly hands-off round table. I gave them a bunch of options. I like to like give people like 5 options and see what they'd like, and then we can mix and match, body types, hairstyles, things like that. And it really wasn't a painful process at all. That's kind of picked and chose, and had didn't really have like major changes, and so I'm really grateful that it came together that easily.
Yeah, I think the style, especially, so 2 words, energetic and humorous, is what I would say. Now, I'm not saying that this would be a comic that you would see in your Sunday funnies as far as like the horror and the monsters or whatever, but aesthetically, the way it visually looks, 100%. So, how important was it for you, Jay, to have somebody in this style? Because it sounds like from what you said earlier, you wanted that kind of humorous aspect to go along with the horror.
Absolutely. It was really, really important to find someone in the style, someone who was willing to take chances, and someone who certainly, obviously, also a black artist who was willing to like go along this ride and help push my writing further and help push the art as far as it could go. And the humor is so, so important. Like I tend to be, it's interesting having, being, a 1 hour drama guy in sort of the TV world. I tend to be a funnier writer. I tend to use a lot of humor, use a lot of dark humor. Humor's always been like an important influence in the work that I do. And so approaching this, I knew I wanted it to be a horror comedy. And so making sure that comedy worked and then getting to see Lee's work and yeah, that cartoony aspect and also the experimental and the sort of genre pushing and the visual storytelling is that's one of the things that I love about comics in general. And getting to work with someone who was taking those chances and like pushing that envelope as far as it could go made me really, really exciting.
Yeah, and it really is a fun story, everybody. So it's going to be in stores on December 18th. The final order cutoff is November 18th. So I'm going to remind you, as I always do when we're talking about these kind of stories before the final order cutoff, the best way you can help out Jay and Lee and the whole Horizon Experiment and your comic shops as well is to pre-order, right? Like let them know this isn't necessarily, a mainstream type book where they're going to be ordering a bunch of copies for the shelves. So if you're thinking, maybe I'll check that out, you may not be able to check it out if it's not on the shelf, right? So let your comic shop know that to order you a copy, set one aside for you. Just mentioning that you're interested in it. If they have enough people, they're going to be, hey, people are talking about this. I better order a few copies, maybe more than I would have, and maybe there will be a copy for the shelf. But don't count on that. Pre-order, pre-order, pre-order. Because, again, it is a really, really fun story with, um, again, it's sort of an ensemble cast. It's got the horror. It's got the humor. And the other thing I love is it's got that trope as these young black kids are saying, don't trust the white guy, but they actually have a reason for that. So I'm curious, Jay, about the interaction between these. So, we have a boy, we have his cousin, we have her girlfriend, and the interactions, they don't necessarily get along, but there's love there. How much are you pulling from kind of your own experiences? You mentioned that you're visiting family right now as we're recording this.
Yeah. Yeah, it is exactly that. These are the conversations that I have had with my siblings, with my cousins, with the members of my family, my parents, my entire life. Assimilating, which I don't even think is a term people really use anymore, which is good, but like that is always a very complicated and difficult process. And everyone has a lot of opinions. And like writing this, there's a lot of love for that, love for my family and for the way, that balance, as Dave Chappelle said back in the good days, of keeping it real, and sometimes that goes wrong, and like that's very much what emotionally what I was drawn to and what I wanted to, what I want to write about. I love characters who are caught between worlds, and like our main character JJ is exactly that. He's caught between two very different worlds, and it was also really important that he could stand on his own as well. That it wasn't just, as much as it is definitely don't trust Whitey, it also wasn't, reject everything that has to do with sort of mainstream culture or, primarily white culture. And so it's an interesting dance, and it's an interesting conversation that I definitely want to keep having.
So as you were reading the script, Lee, was that something that you related to as well, trying to walk that line, honor your own heritage, but hey, unfortunately, it's sort of a white world in a lot of ways. Certainly, the comic industry, it's getting better. But was it something that you related to, Lee?
Yeah, so I'm a military brat, and my father actually taught classes about racism in the military. So this is something I've been growing up with. So I read the script, I was like, oh yeah, I've been here.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, it's unfortunate, but again, I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier about this can be relatable to Blerds, and hopefully it's not just Blerds that are picking it up, because again, everybody, I recommend that this is just. I keep going back to that word energy, man. There's so much energy in this story. It's an easy read. The art's wonderful. I especially liked. There's a character Muffin, and who things go wrong for. You guys probably know the panel I'm talking about. I saw that, and it made me laugh out loud. It was just fantastic. Well, best of luck with the book, gentlemen. Again, remember everybody, pre-order. You have till November 18th. The book's going to drop on December 18th. I'll give you a chance to let everybody know anything else you're working on and where to follow your work online if you're active on social media or what have you. We'll start with you, Jay.
The best place to find me is Instagram at J.Holtham. On Instagram, I'm pretty active there, and that's where I keep things up to date. The new season of Handmaid's Tale will be out next year, and hopefully I'll have more comic stuff to announce soon. We'll see.
Fantastic. And what about you, Micheal Lee?
Best place to find me is Micheal Lee Harris at Instagram. I'm currently putting together a book called The Irrational Fears of a Black Dad. It's going to be put out by Iron Circus. So hopefully I get it finished this coming year, and it'll be out maybe early next year.
Awesome. We'll have to have you back on to talk about it when the time's right.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'll put links to both Instagram accounts in the show notes, everybody. So if you're having trouble following them, go and check it out. So once again, November 18th, final order cutoff in comic shops, December 18th. Gentlemen, best of luck with the book. Hopefully we get to have more of it because, again, really, really fun. And I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having us.
Right.
This was
Thank
great.
you very much.
And all three of us would like to express our gratitude for you taking the time to join us as well, whether you're listening on the audio-only feed or checking us on YouTube. We really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next time.